Welcome to Sailing Stories. I'm your host, Jerome Rand. Today, we're getting into a story that is literally, this guy's like my hero. What he ends up doing is so great, but it's essentially someone who goes out to cross an ocean, doesn't know how to sail, barely knows how to use the boat he's on, goes through a hurricane, all sorts of stuff happens, and essentially you get a grand adventure that spans months and months and months. And today's story is about John Caldwell. And this all takes place right after World War II. Essentially, this guy had gone and he married a girl in Sydney, Australia. He was in the Merchant Marines and he got sort of released and he was in Panama. And he had to get back, but there wasn't a lot of shipping going on in the Pacific at that time, post-war. And so the only way he could really do it was he bought a sailboat. He bought this 29-foot wooden sailboat. It was a cutter, just like Sparrow. And he took off basically not knowing anything, and he wanted to sail the 10,000 miles across the Pacific to get to her. And he was leaving right at the very beginning of the hurricane season in the Pacific. So really not the best planning possible, but the guy's in love. He's got to get back to her, and so he's just willing to make the leap. So he spends a couple of weeks right there in Panama trying to figure out the boat. He falls overboard. All this stuff happens to him, and as he actually sets out, he's going to head to the Galapagos Islands first, but within a day, he ends up running into an uprooted tree, and it springs a bunch of the wooden planks on the side of the boat, and so the boat starts sinking, and he luckily brings it back to a beach in Panama and saves it there, and then he decides, okay, well, now I'm ready. And so, legend he is, he takes off and he sails to the Galapagos, and on the way there, he is able to hook a big shark, and he thinks, for some reason, he gets it in his head that it'd be awesome if he can catch the shark, kill it, and pull the jaws out and show those to his wife in Australia as sort of, I guess, like a look what I can do sort of thing. Well, this is like a couple 100-pound shark, and he gets it up into the cockpit of this tiny boat, but then all of a sudden it snaps back to life. It's thrashing around, it's going crazy, and destroys the tiller, breaks a whole bunch of the stuff in the cockpit, essentially almost sinks the boat again before he can get it back overboard. So just sort of a nightmare scenario. But he stops in the Galapagos Islands and he cleans the seaweed off the bottom of the boat and stuff, and then he takes off, and his idea is to sail down to the Marquesas, a couple thousand miles away into the Pacific, and he ends up getting pretty far off. I think it takes him 29 days to get down there, which is a heck of a feat, so he's doing pretty well, and he ends up doing so well that he sees the Marquesas, but then he decides, you know what? I'm going to keep going. You know, I don't have a ton of food, but I'm going to keep going. I want to get there as soon as possible, and I want to get out of the hurricane zone. And so he goes and he passes on and goes to a group of islands called the Caroline Islands, and he stops there to just get coconuts and sort of revamp his supply of water and food. After he does that, only about 3 days out from the Caroline Islands, a hurricane starts brewing right behind him. And essentially, once it hits, I mean, it's serious, real deal stuff. When you're in that weather, if you don't know what you're doing and you're still just getting used to the boat, it's pretty much a nightmare situation. And he did what a lot of old-time sailors used to do, which basically is lash everything down, take the sails down, and go lash yourself in your bunk and hope that the boat can handle it. Now, over the next 3 days, this hurricane just ravaged his boat, and he's getting pushed around and all stuff. The masts get broken off. Tons of the equipment down below all gets broken as well. And by the time the storm is gone, he's basically just a sitting duck. He's got just huge major troubles. It's amazing that he hasn't sunk. He gets all the water out of the boat, no longer has any navigation equipment. He has to make his own little mast and piece together some sails, and he does all that. But unfortunately, he's only moving at about a knot or 2 knots, so he's going really slow now. And he's sort of hoping that he'll be able to get to the next set of islands down there, which would be Samoa. And still, it's a long ways away. And because he's going so slow, he starts to eat through all the food that he has, and it gets really desperate. Now, I've been in a situation where I've had to ration food for many months, but I've been able to sort of handle it and ration it out and still have enough so that I can at least eat a few hundred calories a day. I still lost a lot of weight, but I had stuff. He ran right out of food, like completely. So first he starts eating like his toothpaste, and then he starts actually like cooking. If he has flying fish fall on the deck, he'll cook those up, but he doesn't have oil, so he's using like hair cream oil or actually motor oil and eating it with that. He gets so desperate that he starts cutting up his boot. Literally, this dude eats his shoe, fries up the leather in like hair grease so that he can soften it up to actually eat it. Then he starts scraping the barnacles off the bottom of the boat. I mean, total legend. This is epic. I can't even believe he's doing this. And he's sort of eking his supply out, but he's literally like starving, pretty much almost to death out there. But slowly but surely he's moving and moving and moving, and eventually he ends up crashing onto a coral reef outside on one of the Fijian like island chains out there. And nobody's on it, but after about 3 days, some people show up, and they're kind of like, well, we can help you out a little bit, and but they're only there to farm copra, which is like a coconut product. And the next supply boat that's going to come isn't for like 4 months. So he essentially has to just hang out on this island with these other farmers for a few more months. And then eventually the ship comes in and he is actually saved and gets taken all the way to Australia and is reunited with his wife. And I think the whole ordeal takes somewhere around like a year or so to actually have everything happen. And I mean, like I said, absolute legend. I'm doing it all for love and really just risking everything in the name of that. I think is just absolutely phenomenal. I do, however, see how bad of an idea it was to actually go and attempt this. And he's lucky he's alive. It really is amazing that he did not perish out there at sea. So it's a bit of a cautionary tale, but I think it's one of those that really pulls at the old romantic strings when it comes to sailing, ocean voyages, and reuniting yourself with the ones you love. So that's the story for today. Hope you enjoyed it. More to come. Thank you very much.